Alright, peace and greetings YouTubers. Rasheem Carter. Before I start, I do want to give a disclaimer. This is a much heavier subject matter, so if you are not in a space to hear about trauma and a lot of the gruesome details, I suggest you check out from this video and come back when I have something a bit more whimsical. I want to go ahead and I want to actually start by reading the article that I'm going to reference, and I'm also going to post a link to about 3 or 4 additional articles in the description of this video just because there are so many details that are ever evolving. I was trying to get one of the more recent articles to reference, but there's so many details in this case, and I don't think you can get everything from just one article. It's almost like you have to read all of them to really piece together everything that's happening, just because there's so many questionable points within this entire narrative as far as what the police have been saying and what's been put out there. And so I'm going to read the segment and then we'll chat. A young black man told his mom he was being followed by white men. Then he was found dead. Rasheem Carter's family believes police in Taylorsville, Mississippi are hiding details about his death. Rasheem Carter was a star wide receiver in high school and the captain of his baseball team in Fayette, Mississippi. He was very outgoing. He loved sports, said his mother, Tiffany Carter. After graduating from Hines Community College in Utica in 2016 with a degree in welding and cutting technology, he went to work for a railroad company in Brookhaven, Mississippi, which his mother said was his first real job. In late September, Carter started a new lumber contracting job in Taylorsville, Mississippi. The job helped him support his young daughter, but on October 1st last year, he called and sent his mother a worrying text that expressed fear for his life. When he sent that to me, I freaked out and I kept calling and calling him until he texted back saying, "I'm good, Mama," Tiffany Carter told Huffington Post. When they were on the phone, she told Huffington Post, Carter said white men in 3 pickup trucks were following and harassing him. Later that day, he went to the police station in Taylorsville. What happened there remains a key point of contention between his family and the police. According to Tiffany Carter, Rasheem went to the Taylorsville police twice to report he feared for his life. He also asked for a ride back to the Super 8 motel in Laurel, where he was living, about 22 miles southeast of Taylorsville. Police agreed that Carter asked for a ride, but they have given conflicting accounts about the extent to which he voiced fear for his life, or if he did at all. Earlier this year, Taylorsville police told Huffington Post that Carter never mentioned fearing for his life, and that police denied his request for a ride because they were not a taxi service. But Taylorsville Police Chief Gabe Horn told a local newspaper something else in December, that Carter did file a police report when he visited the station but declined to press any charges against whomever was threatening him. He said police refused to give him a ride to Laurel because it was out of the department's jurisdiction. Carter left the police station and he never made it back to the motel. Meanwhile, Tiffany Carter was in a growing panic. All she could think about was what he texted her. As more time passed, she sent her friend out to find him, but the friend was unsuccessful. So Tiffany Carter reported her son missing to Laurel authorities on October 2nd. She had spoken to him earlier that day and had a normal conversation, but then he stopped responding to subsequent messages. "I called them and reported that my son was missing. I had not talked to him, and it was strange that we didn't talk," she told Huffington Post. 1 month later, on November 2nd, police found Carter's body in a wooded area just a few miles from the Taylorsville police station. The Taylorsville Police Department would not comment on the case. Huffington Post made several calls and sent emails to contact Horn, but did not receive a response. The Smith County Sheriff's Office in Raleigh, which was running the investigation, put out a statement on November 3rd. "At this time, we have no reason to believe foul play was involved, but the case is still under investigation." The Carter family was immediately skeptical. The autopsy performed by the state medical examiner later that month on November 22nd was more circumspect. It did note that the remains showed no pathological conditions or significant skeletal trauma, but did observe several fractures. It said decomposition was very advanced and the remains were incomplete. It listed the cause of death as undetermined. Smith County Sheriff Joel Houston told Huffington Post that that is how his office is treating the case, and that it is actively pursuing several angles, including several search warrants for electronic devices. But to the family and their lawyer, noted civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump, the remains show something else altogether. Crump's office took possession of Carter's remains after the state was finished and performed an independent analysis of the state results, as well as an independent autopsy. In a Monday news conference, Crump said his examinations revealed that Carter had been dismembered and his head was not attached to his body. What that tells us is that this was a nefarious act. This was an evil act. Somebody murdered Rasheem Carter, and we cannot let them get away with this, Crump said. When you look at these pictures taken at the autopsy, it tells you there is nothing natural about this. It screams out for justice. There are other details that deepen the question of whether somebody killed Carter. On October 4th, Tiffany Carter said an investigator flagged to her that there was a $500 transaction on his debit card from an ATM. She shared a transaction record with the Huffington Post that showed the card. But Houston, the Smith County Sheriff, told Huffington Post his office believed the card had not actually been used since August, and he did not explain the discrepancy with the transaction record. And disturbing imagery from Carter's final hours has shocked his family. Someone captured Carter on a deer trail camera on the property where his body was found. The photos began circulating in the community. Someone shared one photo with the family, and police also became aware of the photos, Houston said. The image Carter's family saw and shared with Huffington Post shows a side profile of Carter in the woods with his shirt off, wearing blue jeans and some kind of wooden object on his shoulder. Tiffany Carter said she believes the image shows her son in fear as he was running away from someone trying to protect himself. Houston did not say if there were other photos of Carter in his last days. The family, local activists, and residents want answers about what happened. Tiffany Carter thinks police have not been forthcoming about all the details surrounding her son's death. "I will never let my son go, never. He will always have a place in my heart because that was my baby boy," Tiffany Carter said. "I can't change what has happened, but I can make sure it doesn't happen to somebody else. I can go out there and still fight and try to get justice for my son and anybody else." The case initially received little to no media attention, but the rallies and demonstrations in Taylorsville have garnered the attention of local television stations. Over the last 5 months, Carter's family has held several demonstrations that have drawn significant local turnout. Duvalier Malone, an author and activist from Fayette, where Carter was born, told Huffington Post that Mississippi's violent history against black people is the main reason why Carter's family and other local activists in the state are uneasy. Mississippi's justice system is still brutally not made for black or brown people. You cannot tell me if that was a white body gone missing, Mississippi Bureau of Investigation and the FBI wouldn't have aggressively been looking into this, Malone said. "It's amazing how Rasheem is one of the many stories that go unreported in Mississippi every day, and that poor family is hurting as a result of it." Rasheem knew he was in danger, he went to the police station, and there has been a lack of accountability to the police station, Malone added. A Washington Post report found that since 2000, there have been at least 8 suspected lynchings of black men and teenagers in Mississippi, and local police departments have repeatedly been accused of racist practices. Carter's family said it's not going to stop pushing for answers. "It happens, but this time, it happened to the wrong person, which is Rasheem," said Tasha Clark, his cousin, "because he has family that is going to fight behind him." So this is where the details become even more disturbing and things get even sketchier. The family's already in a space where they're thinking, okay, wait a minute, something is not adding up here because the police are not really moving with a sense of urgency. They're not really answering questions. It doesn't help that there has been a man who has come to them 2 different times and said, "Hey, somebody's after me. I don't feel safe. I'm fearing for my life." And not only was he dismissed, but now this man is dead. And the police are moving as if this man just went out in the woods and died of natural causes. And so you know what? Let's bring in a private investigator and let's also have an independent autopsy. And so they do the independent autopsy, and when the results come back, they don't quite align with what the police have been saying. One, to start things off, and I saw this during the press conference with Ben Crump. He actually had pictures. I'm not going to post the pictures because I don't even think we need the visuals to paint this story. It's already disturbing enough. And so when Ben Crump talks about the details of this independent autopsy, one of the most noticeable things is that Rasheem's skull has been severed in half. And it's almost in a space where it looks like it's been severed by some kind of machine, because if you've seen the pictures of what the skull looks like, it's like a perfect cut, almost like they might have used one of those electronic saws that you kind of just push on the table when you're cutting plywood. It kind of looks like that. I hate to kind of disturb you guys with the details, but you know, so that's one piece that's there. And so in addition, there are no teeth in the skull. All of the teeth are missing. Right? This is almost kind of reminding me of some of the details when you heard about what happened with Emmett Till, right? And then the other portion was that, okay, then you had his spine, which was located in an area totally far away from where the skull had been located. The body had decomposed down to a skeleton level in less than 30 days, which normally isn't common. It can happen when it's really, really hot outside, but it was October. It wasn't hot like that. And in addition to that, normally when it comes to like decomposition, that's something that takes months to a year to get to that state. And so something had triggered the advancement or the acceleration of that decomposition. Now, this specific portion is somewhat rumored, but it's also been referenced a few times in some of the articles. But it was also stated that, you know, he had been castrated, and what had been castrated from him had been actually placed in his mouth as far as the actual skull, if you get what I'm talking about. And then in addition to that, the body was found in a wooded area on private property, right? And in addition to that, the actual bones that were found were rather greasy. And so this ties into some of the rumors that had kind of been spread around in the area. One of the rumors in Taylorsville was that his body had actually been dropped off pretty much in like a pig pen, you know, like on like a pig farm, and that the pigs had eaten the body. Now that is one thing that's kind of been circulating in the rumor mill. There's not really any confirmation of that, but that is something that had been floating on social media. And even before this story really blew up the way it has in the last few days. And also shout out to the channel Nosy Bystander, because she definitely has been talking about this for the last few months. But so subscribe to her channel when you get a chance. But, you know, there had also been videos on social media where it shows a group of teenagers kind of joking about a body being dropped off in a pig pen and being eaten by pigs, and it kind of references Rasheem Carter. And so that's kind of been floating around. And it doesn't also help that this specific area is an area of Mississippi that's already surrounded by a bunch of sundown towns. And we've talked about sundown towns on this channel before. Long story short, if you're black and you're in the area, make sure you're out of that area before the sun goes down, because anything goes and you will not be protected, and there's no guarantee that the police will have your back. That's pretty much been the experience of sundown towns. That's one of the reasons why we had to have green books in order to travel across the country back in the day. And so there's a whole lot of nonsense going on, in addition to the fact that he's pretty much was on the phone with his mother and told her, hey, Mom, I've been having an issue with one of my coworkers. If something happens to me, please look into this individual. So you have all of these different sketchy details already taking place. Now, this is where I give the police a very, very strong side eye, because going back to the independent results of that autopsy, remember, they found a skull that was severed in half. That also means that when they did the initial autopsy, they saw that same skull in the same condition that it was seen in by the independent autopsy, meaning they saw the skull severed in half. And so how is it that you see that and then you still release a statement on November 3rd and say, hey, well, we have no reason to suspect any kind of foul play? That right there told me everything I needed to know. All right, I was like, okay, this is some nonsense. And so pretty much, long story short, the police either know more than they're putting out, or they have some kind of connection to all this, and that's all it is to it. Because again, the fact that you can sit there and say that there's no reason to suspect foul play and there's a head that's been sawed in half, that's not natural. But you know, they'll go and tell us any kind of nonsense. I'm sure, give it a minute, they would have had a press conference and been like, oh, well, you know, sometimes naturally, you know, when someone passes, sometimes the skull just splits in half. It just split. You know, they'll say anything sometimes. And again, it just goes back to the fact that a lot of times we've seen the police lie so many times on so many different occasions. They lie when they do things that are in the wrong and try to cover themselves and cover their behinds. And sometimes it's not even anything that they did, but they allow things to happen and they don't do anything about it. They move with a lack of urgency. It makes me even think back to everything we saw in Ferguson, and the fact that the initial 6 activists that really brought the attention to what was happening in Ferguson around 2014, 2015 are all dead. And even when you look at the mysterious circumstances surrounding their deaths, the police always had the same response: no reason to suspect any foul play. You have somebody who pretty much died in a burning car, burned alive in a car. Oh, we don't know what happened. It just, you know, nothing crazy happened, nothing out of the ordinary, you know. They'll give some kind of random justification. It makes me even think back to the individual, and this goes back to sometimes when the police like to cover up things, right? Remember the individual who was charged, you know, they got arrested for marijuana, all right? Marijuana, they get the charge, they put them in the back of the squad car, and then they say, oh, well, he killed himself in the back of the car. They were trying to say, you know, he had a gun, and he shot himself in the head in the back of the car. And I'm piecing this together like, wait a minute. So there's an individual, they get charged, marijuana charge at that, and it wasn't even a whole lot. So it wasn't like if he would have gone to jail, he was going to be doing some serious time. This was going to be maybe 2 or 3 months in some community service, but apparently that was worth ending that person's life over, right? And so you have this individual who, they get arrested for a marijuana charge. The police will always frisk you when they put you in the back of the car, so they would have found the gun right then and there, and then this person is also cuffed. So they are cuffed, and somehow they were able to maneuver and get this gun out of wherever it was found, and somehow cock it back, aim it perfectly, and take their own life in the back of a squad car over a marijuana charge. Make it make sense. See, they be up here just playing in our faces. Even when you talk about Breonna Taylor and the narrative that was put out there, the way they wanted to paint Breonna Taylor to be just drug queen pin over there in that apartment complex, and she had connections to all the drug dealers in the entire state. She just had so much going on, and America bought into it. All right, the way folks flocked in to tear this woman down, you know, and somehow her sleeping in the bed and getting shot, she definitely did something wrong. That was what was painted. And then we fast forward and we discovered the big cover-up. We discovered there were so many flaws within all of the investigation. They had bad intel, knew they had bad intel, still operated on it. They knew that the individual that they initially were looking for didn't even live there, had no connections to Breonna Taylor, and then had the nerve to try to charge the actual boyfriend for shooting at the police because they busted up in the apartment, you know, with a no-knock warrant, barely in uniform, didn't announce himself. The boyfriend shoots at them thinking the house is being broken into, and then they had the nerve to try to charge him. Also, by the way, they had to pay him a $2 million settlement for their nonsense. And now you have the Department of Justice, with all the flaws that they have. Even they were like, wait a minute, hold on. Okay, now we normally let a lot of nonsense slide, but this one here, y'all, we're going to have to just call y'all out on that one. So you have that going. Even with Ahmaud Arbery and the nonsense that happened with that, and the fact that, again, there's even a cover-up with that where you have, you know, people who were literally in the force now being indicted on charges with their connection to the Ahmaud Arbery case and how they tried to bury it. And even with that, what did they do? They said, let's go ahead and tear down the image of Ahmaud Arbery, and we're going to paint this narrative of, oh, he had been breaking into the houses, and we're going to have this random person talk about a boat they had in their shed where there was a gun that went missing weeks ago, and they didn't know if Ahmaud Arbery had the gun, and he was afraid because he has a young daughter. And, you know, they paint all these stupid narratives and everything, so they lie all the freaking time. And so a lot of times when it comes to the police, I got a side eye before they even open their mouth. I'm like, let me see what they're about to say on this one. All right, let's see how they paint this one together. You know, and even when there's footage, they still will lie. We've seen a million body cam photos and cell phone videos, and they will still sit here and lie right in your face. Even with Rodney King, you know, they were still trying to say, well, he was the aggressor, and we're watching this man getting his head cracked with a flashlight and a baton. But again, going back to my point, you always see the lack of urgency with a lot of these departments, okay? We saw it with Daniel Robinson in Arizona when he was missing. We saw it with Jelani Day in Illinois when he was missing. We saw it with Tony Jacobs in Virginia when she was missing. Like, they will take their sweet time depending on who it is when they want to act or not act. And so from that moment, it just made me look at that department very, very crazy. And the fact that they said, you know, well, when he came to the department, he didn't really seem that concerned about his well-being. It didn't seem like anyone was after him. And I'm like, well, what did he come to y'all for 2 different days for? He clearly wasn't coming there to sell Cutco knives and Girl Scout cookies. He then came in there and said, hey, somebody's after me. And the other part is, the mother was on the phone during one of those interactions, and she heard them say, no, we're not taking you to Laurel, Mississippi, because we're not a taxi service. And in response to that, because some people were saying, well, yeah, the police, they can't take him to Laurel because that's not in their jurisdiction. Understand that it is not uncommon for the police to take somebody to another jurisdiction and then trade them off, and then the people in that jurisdiction carry out the rest of the assignment. So it would have been nothing for them to take him to, you know, as far as they can go and then call dispatch for another department to come and take the person from there. They do that all the time when the police find teenagers that have been out at 2 or 3 in the morning and they're somewhere where they're not supposed to be and they need to get home. The police have no problem doing that, so I don't want to hear that excuse. And just to put that into context, Laurel and Taylorsville are about 22 miles apart. He got the job, as far as Rasheem Carter, he got the new job in Taylorsville. He had just, you know, got his degree from one of the community colleges in Utica, Mississippi, and so that's why he moved to Taylorsville. He didn't even have his place and stuff yet. He was staying at the motel. He had a car had been acting funny. He had fell out with one of the friends that was supposed to be giving him the ride, so that's why he was walking. And so, yeah, that's why he needed the ride to Laurel to get home. He did not feel safe because, again, hey, there's guys in 3 trucks that keep following me. Please do something. And the police pretty much said, no, we're not a taxi service. And not only that, but no, you can't even stay here. You need to leave. You got to go. All right? So I'm side-eyeing all of that. Okay? You can't sit here and say, well, he didn't seem concerned. He came to you guys 2 different times. To me, that is consistency. That pretty much is a pattern. That shows that something is not right. Right? And then they even try to tell the mom, well, you know, he might have just been on something. He could have been hallucinating and just walked onto that random property and died, you know, because they love to do that too. They'll always say, well, they were on something. You know, if we're not violent, make us a drug addict, make us have some kind of substance abuse problem. And that can justify how we somehow ended up with our head sawed in half, how we ended up with a skull with no teeth in it. And then you're going to try to say the animals did that. Listen, I'm going to tell you this right now. I understand that vultures and stuff do eat decomposing bodies, but I don't remember vultures and stuff popping teeth out of a skull. So stop playing in people's faces. And I apologize if I'm coming off a little too gruesome with the details, but, you know, I'm just like, y'all are just out here doing any and everything. And they even had the nerve to say there was no way to even to confirm that he had been pursued or he was being followed. And I'm like, again, he came to you all twice and said, this is what's happening. This is where I'm at. I need some assistance. You guys gave no help. You moved with no sense of urgency. The man is now dead. So clearly somebody was pursuing him, right? And then when you talk about the police chief, Gabe Horn. All right, now this is mentioned in some of the articles that I'm going to share in the description. I'm not 100% sure if this has been confirmed, but it's mentioned in, I want to say, the Mother Jones article, that Gabe Horn is related to the property owner where the body was found, allegedly. right? You have that aspect. They also said gay porn is also a member of a group that kind of gets together, and allegedly members of that group may be connected to the disappearance of Rasheem Carter. And so there are just too many dots around here that are connecting to a lot of nonsense. And so as I look at this, I'm just like, this whole thing is crazy. And again, this is another situation where, had it not been for the mother, Tiffany Carter, just being persistent and getting media attention, this would be another story none of us have ever heard of. That's the other part that disturbs me. And that's where you see the discrepancy in all of this, because let's be honest, had that had been a white woman who had gone to the police station on 2 different occasions and said, hey, I don't feel safe, there are black men in a truck following me and I'm walking, oh, they would have brought out the works on this one. I mean, they would have had helicopters out there surveying the area, looking for this truck, and she would have definitely got a ride to Laurel, Mississippi. They would have given her a ride in class. They might have even called her one of them special Ubers, you know, when they get the limo, the special kind of, you know, traction. They would have made sure she was good. Okay, they would have did everything. And if she would have gone missing, oh, don't worry, they would have been going house to house looking for her. They would have called the local news. Now you got volunteers. Everybody's out there calling for Sarah, all in the woods with the dogs and everything. They go all out, okay? But you see that because, again, this is Rasheem Carter, a 25-year-old black man. Well, I mean, he must not be in that much danger. Now all of a sudden they can decipher whether or not somebody's in danger based on how the, you know, the inflections in their voice have been presented. So we're going to look at all that, and we just didn't feel like it was that serious. And again, we're not a taxi service. But also understand that what has happened to Rasheem Carter is not anything new under the sun. We've seen so many instances where black people have been lynched or murdered all across this country by racists. It's not even just limited to Mississippi. We've seen it in California. We've seen it everywhere. It's not something that's only limited to the South. But it also even makes me think to Michael McDonald, who we talked about on a few videos. Remember, he was another individual back in '81. Walking, minding his business, and then you had these Klan members who decided, we're going to go to the black side of town and start up some stuff. And so they pull up to him, ask him for directions, and he, being the nice person that he was, and, you know, just wanting to help, that southern hospitality, went to try to give them directions, and next thing you know, he gets snatched up. And so, you know, they take him out way into the woods, and he knows what's happening. He tries to escape. They beat this man with a tree limb so bad that he's pretty much out, and then sadly, they slit his throat 3 different times, and then they still hang him from a tree. That's the America we're living in, all right? And so that's the kind of nonsense. And even when you reference what the mother talks about when she says that, hey, there was a picture of him on somebody's, you know, house surveillance system where it shows him kind of running from something, and he has no shirt on, he has a gash on his face, and he's carrying a big stick. It's almost reminiscent with the Michael McDonald case where, again, it's, you know, running for your life. You're out in the middle of nowhere, and at this point, you're doing anything and everything to get away from whoever it is that is after you. And so, again, there's no way you can sit here and tell me that there is no reason to suspect foul play when all of these crazy, sketchy details are taking place. And so it just goes back to what I was saying, because a lot of times people come and they love to refute any kind of conversation about race when you highlight the racism that exists in America. Folks love to bring up, oh no, this is the problem. It's divisive. You know, we got to just give more love and so on. That's the problem. Y'all keep bringing it up. And I'm like, first of all, America has never loved us. Never has and probably never will. Black people are tolerated in America. And that's only because they couldn't get rid of us after slavery. It was like, dang, they still got to be here. All right, well, we're going to figure out how to deal with them. And dealing with us just is pretty much just making sure that our existence is in a space where it doesn't interfere with anybody else's experience. That's really what it is. And so that's why people want to keep us in our place all the time. That's why when black people cry out about anything that's taking place, people want to silence us. And even when you bring up policy, when you bring up the facts, when you highlight all of the different things that are wrong in the United States in regards to how they treat black Americans, people will still fight you tooth and nail to pretend that you've just lost your mind. And it's all in your head. And we just need more love. You know what I mean? And then we got to move past race. And I'm like, what are we moving past? We're sitting right in it. In 2023, again, you can have somebody get followed by a bunch of white dudes in a truck, end up dead, have their head severed in half, have their teeth ripped out of their skull, and people pretend that it's just something that happened and yeah, there's no foul play. Yeah, you went out in the woods and died. What's the problem? You know, the same kind of nonsense, right? And so it's just understanding that this country has always been hateful. And in the same way that I've been saying on a lot of videos since about 2018, that they are cementing a lot of the nonsense that they want to hold on to through policy, they're also doing it through violence. And that has always been a thing. And everybody knows that, all right? And we're now in a space where a lot of the violent ones, they feel also empowered to go out and carry out the things that they want to carry out because now they have backing, they have support. We've seen kind of the shift in what's happened in our politics where people are pretty much, you know, just upfront with their racism at this point. You know, they endorse all kind of nonsense. And so a lot of times those same people that used to kind of hide and just live on the internet and talk on the forums, do all whatever they needed to do, now they can be upfront and out in the open with it because there are enough of them in number, to kind of have weight, to be able to lock in and have connections with police departments and all these different jurisdictions and everything else, so they can just do whatever they want and they don't have to worry about losing their livelihood. You know, you rewind 20 or 30 years ago, you know, we still had the same issues with race, but we were in a space where, you know, the people that were racist or the people that, you know, loved the idea of anti-black violence, they couldn't be as open because they could lose everything. We're not in that space right now because look at what's happening, right? You know, at this point, everybody's confident. They having meetings at Applebee's. You know, I'd like to propose a toast, right? That's where we're at. And so again, you're watching people fight and claw to cement that status quo through policy, through violence. And again, when I talk policy, I'm talking about the nonsense that we're seeing. You see it with them now banning books and restructuring what's allowed to be taught in schools. And even HB 999, I'm going to talk about that on my next live that I think I'm going to do either Sunday or Monday night, all right? You know, and what we just saw also in Mississippi with the creation of these new jurisdictions that, you know, it just passed in the Senate as well as far as the state Senate and everything. And again, what we see with voter disenfranchisement, and even the fact that you have corporations and companies fighting and clawing for deregulation so that they could put more poison in the air, because a lot of the neighborhoods in which these factories exist are clearly in areas where you have large populations of black people, which again go to a conversation of redlining and conversations of gerrymandering and conversations of freeway systems destroying neighborhoods. We could be here all day and unplug all of this, but for the sake of this argument, I want to stick to Rasheem Carter. What happened to him was terrible. It was nonsense, but it highlights the flaws that exist in America. This man didn't even get to make it to 30. And when you just think about the fact that he was just trying to do everything in his power to be successful. He went to school, went to college in Utica, Mississippi, got this job, didn't even have his housing set up yet, but was, you know, excited to work and was willing to commute 22 miles to make it work. And somebody still found flaw in his existence and decided that he didn't need to live. And then people tried to cover it up and act like nothing was wrong. That's the flaws that exist within America. Anyway, I'm out. Share your 2 cents. Subscribe. Best wishes to their family. And police, y'all stop playing in people's faces. We know what's going on. And to everybody that's trying to act like this is just something that isn't out of the ordinary. Okay. Anyway, I'm out.